Welcome to the Backpack Show, everybody. Chris Brogan is on an airplane, so sadly won't be joining us today, and that's a shame because I think today's guest would be right up his alley. Jane Boulware recently wrote her first book, Worthy: From Cornfields to Corner Office of Microsoft, but there's so much more to Jane Boulware than just the book. It goes from her journey from a childhood, which would you say disadvantaged? I don't want to be like, you were a poor child, but a lot of
I would
jobs.
say definitely not born with a silver spoon. Maybe like a plastic spoon at best.
Making your own way up to the highest levels of the corporations, many billion-dollar businesses and more. So we have a lot to talk about. Don't go away.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
Jane, thanks so much for joining today. I really am sad that Chris can't be here. I'm going to have a fantastic time talking with you about this.
So we'll just hang out together.
We'll just hang out together. Okay. I have hosted many shows on my own. You're in good hands.
I'm not down, no doubt.
Hello, Chloe from Scotland. Chloe, Jane, Chloe.
Hey, Chloe. Thanks for joining.
So one of the things that I loved about your book in particular is that it's so important for women. So women who are going to seek roles in leadership. One of the things that you talk about is how women tend to wait until we feel like we are ready to take on a leadership role. Yep. And men don't do that same thing. They just sort of plow ahead. So when did you discover that just saying yes and going for it was the thing to do?
If I didn't discover that early on, I probably would still be working at the Piggly Wiggly in Iowa. So I discovered early on to say yes. And probably my favorite word is yet. So someone would ask me if I've done this, if I had this experience, et cetera. And I would say not yet, because my thinking was, even though I haven't done it yet, I'm capable of doing it. And so I really got into that when I went to college, and I was unsure of myself because I didn't have that background. I didn't know even if I was college material. And then I went and got my MBA, and I got a master's degree at a university that required, 2 to 5 years of experience and a lot of engineers. And here I was, this kid from Iowa with a forestry degree, seriously, forestry degree. And I thought, wow, I'm not ready for this. I am not ready for the big show. But then I realized that even though I didn't have the titles and the job experience per se, I had the experiences. I had the ability to learn and to pull together what I'd done. And that made a difference. That made a really big difference. So I think early on, I started to kind of accept that even though my background was different, it was valuable, and that I could think in a way and do things that, even though my pedigree said rural Iowa and forestry student, my ability said so much more.
So let's talk a little bit about how you managed to set yourself on that path, because as you mentioned, your background is not what you traditionally find in the boardroom at a company like Microsoft. So talk me, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about your upbringing in Iowa, and also what gave you kind of your first inkling that you could do college, that you could succeed in that environment.
There was a lot of questions there.
Sorry, yes, unpack them one at a time.
Is I was born in a rural community, in a farming community in Iowa, to a family that I'm very proud of, and in circumstances I'm very proud of, because although we didn't have a ton of money, what we didn't have, we found, made, or borrowed. And I honestly didn't even know that what we didn't have. I just thought every kid kind of grew up pitching in, funding their own way, et cetera. That's what we did, and that's what I knew. But I also knew that I didn't want a life. It didn't seem to fit me, the life of my mother and grandmother, et cetera, the heritage before me. But my line of sight was so small. I'd never really been outside of a 100-mile radius except to go visit the Ozarks, which didn't raise my bar a lot. And I didn't know of a world beyond my community. I really didn't. And it was a gnarly old nun. She was like 5 foot nothing. She had lightning bolts that came from her eyes, but she commanded respect. When she said something, man, you just hopped to and you believed it. And so one day after school, she pulled me aside and said, "What are you doing after you graduate?" And I expressed the fact I didn't know for sure. I just knew I wanted something. And she said, "You should go to college. I'm going to help you get a scholarship." So not only did she ask, but she acted. And that made all the difference in the world because I started to see myself as college material. And it was almost like when I got that $320 scholarship, it was validation that there was something beyond for me that someone believed in and helped me get. And that's actually why I'm donating 100% of the proceeds to Boys and Girls Club, because had it not been for that scholarship and that gnarly old nun, I don't think I'd be sitting here today.
So if you buy the book, you're going to be supporting Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, 100% of the proceeds are going to Boys and Girls Club to help support scholarships for kids who might not have that line of sight otherwise. But literally, people look at me and they think, it's why I wrote the book. People look at me and they're like, oh, she's got it figured out. Although I'm really, they feel like they're a hot mess. I'm a hot mess too. Been a hot mess, often still am a hot mess. And they think I was born with a silver spoon. I've got all the answers, multi-generational wealth. Could not be further from the truth. Just could not be further from the truth. And there are a lot of obstacles I had to overcome, including my family. Going to college took me from an us to a them. And that was a really big divide. And it took me a long time to bridge the us, them, and for me to feel like I fit in. And I was worthy of the success I achieved.
There's so much there. Before I ask more questions, because women have a lot of imposter syndrome and I want to talk about it. But first, Annette says, Jane, I love that you have a forestry degree, a holistic, multidimensional thinker. The most interesting people unfailingly have a degree in some weird thing or have had jobs doing a million weird things. And you are both of those. Chloe says, I had a therapist in 2022 who taught me to add yet whenever I felt impossibly far from where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful word. Fazia says, that's awesome. Fazia Burke is my favorite.
I love Fazia. Hi, Fazia.
My favorite. I interviewed her once, probably 10 years ago. And I was like, I'm in love with her. I had like a full-on girl crush.
I was just going to say, I think I have a girl crush on her. She's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's one of those people that's overcome as well and has remained very humble and very lovely and open.
Well, get in line, Jane.
Okay, fine. I'll share the love. Let's share the love.
Okay, so women in particular addressing imposter syndrome, I have to think that's compounded when your background isn't necessarily the same as the people around you who have Ivy League degrees and do come from generational wealth. How do you manage that? Not just to do the job, but to be seen doing it and to be part of the group.
Well, first of all, I will say I wrote the book. It's a collection of stories, not to say, I'm Jane and look what I've done and be like me. And here's my program to be like me. Just the opposite.
It doesn't read that way at all, by the way. It's an amazing, it's a collection of short stories and they're just so poignant.
Yeah. The reason I did it is I wanted people to see what the inside, what I felt, not what I did. And what I did was you kind of have to talk about what I did. So people are like, oh, she's credible. But the reality is that at one point I joined Microsoft and I did not fit in at all. And I didn't have multi-generational wealth. I didn't, I had a forestry degree. I didn't know technology, but I did have a pedigree of success and I knew what I was doing. But to fit into the culture, I felt like I had to become something else because they dismissed what was done outside the walls of Microsoft. So I thought, well, I better start to think, act, look, and behave like the people in the walls if I want to behave in the castle. And I'll tell you, that's not a great way to be successful. And it certainly didn't work for me. In fact, it brought me to my knees and left me in a space where I didn't honor who and what I was and what had brought me there. And it was only when I said, hey, I'm going to succeed on my own terms. I'm going to honor the things that brought me here, the way that I lead, the person that I am. I look at myself every day in the mirror. And if I want to lead people, I want them to know and see who they're following truly and connect with that. But I did have imposter syndrome, and that's a lot of the stories in terms of feeling capable and worthy. The thing that I will say, the word yet is really important. But one of the things I had to learn is that I kept hearing from people, you got to be fearless, be fearless. And I think that's baloney. I don't try to be fearless. I just try to fear less and don't let fear get in the way. You're going to be afraid if you're stretching, growing, and doing things outside your comfort zone. So to say that you should be fearless makes women feel like they're inadequate, that they're an imposter because I'm afraid and I don't want to let other people see I'm afraid. What a bunch of crap. we're all afraid. And if you're not afraid, you're not stretching, growing, and so on. So I would say to women who are waiting for that next job until you're not afraid, until you're confident, until you think you have it all figured out, no, do it. You'll never have it all figured out. And if you don't, some other guy most likely is going to get the job in advance.
Yeah.
There's a McKinsey study or a Harvard Business Review study that says that women in general are wait until, obviously, they feel they're ready. And yet their performance is often 14% higher than men before they get a role, oftentimes because they don't even apply or suggest that they would be qualified for the role, which means that they are not only waiting, but they're overqualified by the time they get in it relative to their set, and they still feel like fakes because they're afraid.
Oh, that hurts, Jane. That hurts. Well, fear is a good thing, right? Fear keeps you sharp, but the problem is when you let it keep you from your calling. I actually made it one of my 3 words this year. We have 3 words that I said for the year. Barn is one, which is
I love that.
using the space you're in and what you have to hand to do the things you want to do. T is, maybe don't talk during that meeting. Maybe take it all in, because I've been known to jump in with both hands. But then there's fear. And for me, it's going towards the fear instead of running away from it, because I heard someone talk about that years ago. So you seem as though you've mastered that.
I don't want to be afraid to be afraid. And that's the truth. And I certainly don't want to be afraid to express that I'm afraid. If you're afraid because you're in physical danger, you need to act. You need to get the heck out of whatever that situation is. But if you're afraid because you're uncomfortable, reach for a Tums and keep going. Because it's going to be okay. You're learning, stretching, and growing, and acknowledging, I don't know, and I'm sorry, are words the ego cannot express. So if you're not saying I don't know, it's ego. It's ego. And people respond when someone says, will you help me? I'm not sure I know, and you have something that I don't know. Will you share your expertise with me?
Chris and I interviewed someone not too long ago who said something similar. It was when you ask someone for their opinion, that's what you get. But when you ask for their advice, they become invested in helping you to overcome the problem. Leslie, she's a sugar mama. That's what we called her when we interviewed her. She makes maple syrup. Maple syrup. She says, I agree. There's nothing wrong with facing a fear, but still being afraid at the same time. Right. Like, just don't let it stop you. Now, you have at times on your career journey had occasion to be very afraid about imminent, scary physical things happening to you. So tell me about Medellin.
I had a tendency, I always say, I wasn't always the first to be offered a job, but I was always the last, meaning that I took jobs oftentimes that others thought might be too risky or shitty or uncertain. And one of the roles that I took was I managed the 16 countries south of Mexico when I was in my early 30s. And in some
cases, company, not like governor.
For the company. No. For Kimberly Clark.
I mean, you could though.
Yeah. For Kimberly Clark. And which was interesting because, talk about jumping into the deep end. I was a woman, white, had a 1.5-year-old child, didn't speak Spanish, and I was pretty sure I wasn't qualified, even though my boss thought I was. So again, the worthiness thing. And yet I took the role, which meant I commuted to and from South America, and I didn't speak Spanish for beans. And if you've ever, at that time, this was years ago, got on planes within South America to go to a different country, I swear the signs are like this big. And in a language I didn't speak. And there's it was easy to get on the wrong plane, which I did. And I ended up in Medellin.
They let you get on the
Medellin, wrong city in the middle of Colombia during the drug cartel situation. And
where were you aiming for? Cartagena?
No, I was aiming for Bogota. Yeah. So they were all waiting for me at Bogota. You got the boss coming into town, doesn't get off the plane. And I ended up in the wrong city. And at that time, the international, the planes to get into Bogota were in a different location than the planes coming in from Atlanta. So I had to change airport.
It's not like walking to another.
No. And they're like, this is not good. You are not going to fit in. So I had to figure out a way to get from one airport to the other safely using a language that I didn't know with money I didn't have. And it was, and while what seemingly was a teenager holding a very large gun was staring at me, telling me to move along and scooting me out the door where there were, I didn't have anybody. It was interesting.
And it's not like you could just call an Uber. There's no Uber.
There was no Uber.
The
so
taxis
I literally
are dangerous.
Someone, asked for a ride, which I thought was what I was asking for. I might have been asking for something completely different, in fairness. And he looked at me, I think, assessed the situation. And next thing I knew, I was getting in his car, and it felt like the jaws of the lion, like Daniel going into the jaws of the lion. I don't know the Bible that well, but it just felt like, okay, either I'm never going to be seen again, or this is going to work out. And I'm here. So I guess we know how that ended.
Wow.
So you have a lot of situations where I felt like I just was doing that, throwing myself in. And I was like, oh, what have I done?
Teenager with a gun over here, and then a stranger with a nice car
literally,
over here.
The kid was holding the gun. I don't think he knew what to do with me, and I certainly didn't want to tell him. And I didn't know what to do either. So.
Well, you came out the other side of it. So, I mean,
it came out the other side.
So clearly, something. So Annette, this is a long comment. Sorry. It sort of puts it right up to your chin. Annette says, I just bought the book for Jane's story. Love that 100% of the proceeds will go to the Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you.
I agree. Many clubs. For others wanting to do the same, there's the book. So thanks for sharing that. Annette.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
I don't have a big budget. I require and rely on grassroots. So thank you for helping me grow the grass. I really appreciate it. The coolest response to the book has been that the stories are small and snackable, and it feels like it's become my words and others' stories because people say they can relate to it so much. So the stories might have been, insert different company name here, insert different experience, but the emotions, which is what I focus on, especially as a woman, are very transferable and resonate with a lot of people. So my hope is that when you read the stories, you'll be inspired to rethink what might be possible, and you will be inspired to claim your worth, which is nothing that has to be earned, but something we're all born with. And if you remember that, you're more likely, I think, to put yourself out there and do what you're meant to do and what you want to do.
So I just bought the audiobook. Guess
Yay.
what? There's an audiobook version read by Jane
there
herself. So if you're an audio person like I am, go and get that. I have a question specifically about what you managed to accomplish when you took that role running the corporation in South America. And that is you're dealing with cultural differences that anybody who's not from there would be dealing with. You're also dealing with a language barrier, and you're a woman in charge. And I'm not so sure what the culture is like there in business at that time. So walk me through that. How did you manage to make that a success?
There was that in South America. I was also responsible for working on the Scott Paper business after the merger, where there were unions, and I was working with, a group of basically men. And it seems in my life, most of the situations and companies that I've been working with were very male dominated. And I was often the only woman or one of a very few set of women in the room. And often as I moved up, I was one of the more senior level women, which you would think would give me, situational authority. But it was still a situation where I needed to be able to validate my ability to contribute. And in the case of Latin America, and also in the case of many of the jobs that I took on, I tended to take jobs that were tough. I'm a kind of a turnaround. I like things that are tough. I like things that people think aren't going to work. Not that way. So what that meant was I would come upon a team that was usually pretty good, but had been getting all the arrows and none of the accolades. So when I worked in Latin America, I had translators. I did my best to learn the language. I literally accepted the job. I was offered the job one week and was on a plane for Buenos Aires the next week. It was that fast. Back then, it was you could do that. You didn't have a lot of visas and all that. I was really listening to Spanish language tapes on my way down. The common denominator was that I demonstrated, and I had a good track record. I listened really well, in some cases until I got better through an interpreter. And I asked a lot of questions. And when there were reviews that were happening, I stood up in front of the team. And I represented their work and gave them credit for it. But when there were slings and arrows that were coming, it was really my job to get us where we needed to go. And I tried to take the hill and take the arrows so that my people could take the hill. And in the process of doing that, people stepped up and gained in confidence. And I got to understand their skills and their capabilities and put them in a position where they could shine. And before long, I wasn't there that long, but I'll give you one example. I was in Argentina and we had a review on Monday. And when we left on Friday, we still weren't done. And I said, hey, I hate to say this, but we need to come together on Sunday to put some finishing things on this. And without hesitation, people coming in. People came in dresses and suits because they'd been at a wedding that weekend. And I didn't appreciate that weddings are multi-day events, and they start on Saturday and they didn't finish till Sunday. And they came in despite that. And man, that just was like, holy cow, I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, this is great. This is the first time someone's asked us to contribute in this way. And we got stuff done like this. They went back to the wedding. We did well on Monday. And that was a pretty cool experience.
They at least bring you to the wedding, Jane?
They didn't. No, that's a step too far.
Julia says, so relatable for any journey you're on. I agree.
Thank you, Julia.
I want to talk about one role that was not for you, that didn't work out. Babysitting.
There are several roles that didn't work out for me. I was not a good babysitter. I say in the book, it's hard. Babysitting involved taking care of little kids and playing and all those things. And honestly, I was born in a household where we didn't play. We worked. And there wasn't a lot of nurturing. We kind of raised ourselves. There were 5 kids within 5 years in our house. And even to this day, like when I had kids, my brothers and sisters and I would call each other and we'd say, oh my gosh, how do you play with your kids? What are we supposed to do? Except for my little sister. She always played with dolls, so we kind of shunned her. I was someone that mowed lawns, worked, washed cars, did physical labor. And when it came time to do babysitting, I was scared. And I just said, I can't do this. So my mom kept accepting jobs for me. And so at one point after I put the kids, to sleep, I think they were asleep. I ate some ice cream, did the dishes, and went home. I'm like, they're fine. They're fine.
You left them there?
They're fine. It's like a block and a half. I got home. My mom said, hey, the Kokings got home early. I said, no, they're not home. But the kids they're probably asleep. They're fine. She's like, Janie, you can't do that. And she insisted I go back, and I insisted I wouldn't. And she ended up going back and watching the kids. And yeah, my babysitting services kind of dried up after that.
Fazia says she also tried babysitting once and never again.
Yeah, it just wasn't my jam. I learned later. It's interesting. I say in the book that I fixed a label to myself that I wasn't nurturing and I wasn't good at kids. And that wasn't true. I was just afraid and I didn't have the experience and I'd never seen it before. And I think that's true of all of us. We get in situations where we're asked to do things and we've never had it modeled for us, or we never imagined that we could do it. And so we leave. We don't do it. And it was only later when I got around kids like Boys and Girls Club that I realized, hey, I can do this. There's a part of me that I have to give to this and I'm good at it. But even then, like that label I put on myself, even when I try to take that label off, it just feels like there's a gummy residue of doubt and uncertainty that sticks with me. And my encouragement to anybody that's listening to this is you don't have to have done it to be good at it. You don't have to have had it modeled even, because my parents didn't model being an executive or being a speaker or any of those things or writing books. But I had experiences that prepared me for that, or others that helped prepare me for that. And you're not doing it by yourself. And I'm pretty sure no kid died. Well, they probably did die from having a bad babysitter, but you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be okay.
let's say that they've grown up and they've gone on to lucrative careers in business or whatever. There's one thing I have to do now.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
Ordinarily, Brogan gets to choose, and he's not here. What I'm going to do is choose Fazia, because it was Fazia who brought you to me as a guest. So
yay.
Without Fazia, no fascinating discussion, which I got so lost in that I forgot to thank our sponsor, StreamYard. Thank you, StreamYard, for sponsoring the show. Check it out at cbrogan.net/StreamYard. Y'all just have to get your own executive turned author who managed to make a big impression on every one of her superiors, I would imagine. So the other question I have to ask you, because we've asked everybody from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Sister Anne Flanagan to Mistress Montana, what goes in your backpack for success? This could be something physical, like an extra set of teeth, like DJ Cumberbund said, or it could be something that's not physical, like kindness, which is what burlesque performer Ariel Helvetica put in the backpack. So Jane.
Oh my gosh. That's such a broad question, isn't it?
That's the reason we still do the show, Jane. We can ask about whatever we want.
I should have been better prepared. That's a great question. I would hope that it's lots of things, truthfully, and that my backpack is full. But I would, because of the book, I would say worthiness and the recognition that I am worthy and that I am capable, and that my success, failure, title, bank account, etc., has nothing to do with that worthiness. And that I take that with me everywhere I go, and that every person, everything I encounter, I lead with and know that I am okay and that I'm worthy.
So people need to get rid of the un.
Yeah. One of the first and the last stories in my book, the first one is the story about, as kids, we had a 5-gallon pickle bucket. We didn't have a big house, but we had a 5-gallon pickle bucket. And that was our place. That was our sacred place. We could put all of our stuff in there that we thought was important in our lives, certificates and blah, 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 things that little kids think are important. And my dad chucked my bucket at some point. And so all those things were gone. And I was convinced that I wanted to fill that bucket to the brim to prove that I was worthy. It was like proof of my worth. And you'll read in the back of the book that what I learned in my life is that your bucket already comes full. It comes full. Your pickle bucket is filled with pickles. And it's in the process of your life that you learn that taking it out, taking what you have in your bucket out, and sharing it with others really does make your bucket fuller. It's not about what you put in, it's about what you take out. And I think that's in my backpack. What I focus on is what am I taking out of my backpack? Because I really do think my backpack comes preloaded.
Listen, everybody, get this book, put it in your backpack. I mean, read it and put it in, you know what I'm saying? Get the book and read it, because everybody's got limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And this is proof positive that if you're willing to kind of uncouple yourself from those beliefs, you can make just about anything happen.
Man, if I had a dime for every time I was told what I can't, won't, shouldn't do, but did anyway, I'd be giving even more money to Boys and Girls Clubs. Yeah.
So if Brogan were here, he would have some fun story about his grandmother and how she was such a big success, especially when she ran the neighborhood bake sale and it turned out that, so they didn't invite them to organize the bake sale the next year. We pretty much guess.